Good morning, all, and welcome to today's operator meeting. My name is Sienna, and I will be your host for today. As a reminder, all questions will be answered at the end of all presentations, but please feel free to put them into the chat as they come to you. Please do not ask any questions that are not related to any topics that are on the agenda. With all that being said, Greg, you're up first. Take it away.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks, Sienna. I'm Greg Duranlo. I'm the Deputy Director of Operations here at ECMC. I'm going to be presenting briefly today on the disproportionately impacted communities map, and providing some clarifications for all operators. So first, I want to address an issue that came up after the last operator meeting, and inadvertently, we posted a draft presentation that was in the works and incomplete, and had incorrect information in it after the last operator meeting. So I know that some operators or consultants got a hold of this particular slide here, which mischaracterizes the statutory definition of a disproportionately impacted community. And so today's presentation presents a corrected version of the same slide. Um, and Sienna, unfortunately, oops, I think we lost our slide presentation, and maybe that was something that I did. So here we are. Thank you for picking that back up. Here we are with the correct information. So in November of 2024, ECMC and the Cumulative Impacts Rulemaking adopted the statutory definition for disproportionately impacted community. And the statutory definition lists a number of criteria that are met by a community in a census block group. And it only takes one of those triggers to classify the community as a disproportionately impacted community. So those are 40% of the population are below 200% of the federal poverty line for economics, 50% are housing burdened, greater than 40% are people of color, greater than 20% are linguistically isolated. There are a couple of other factors that have a bit more description to them, which include a community that is subjected to historical environmental racism, or another state agency determination. And then there are two, and I'll describe those two in a minute. There are two that are also always triggers. And in these last two cases, they don't have to be in a census block group, and that's why I've got them separated in the little box there. Mobile home communities and members of the Southern Ute or Ute Mountain Ute tribes in Southwest Colorado. Um, so to expand on the community identified by a statewide agency, um, these include basically the federal Justice 40 description and the EnviroScreen evaluation of an EnviroScreen score greater than 80. And so this is the place where the EnviroScreen data is tied into the disproportionately impacted communities map. And currently that is established through by CDPHE through the application of EnviroScreen 2.0. And just so that everyone is aware, we are proposing to align our rules with CDPHE's rules on the use of EnviroScreen 2.0. So that's just a clarification on the statutory definition from an erroneous posting after the last operator meeting. Um, so now I want to update folks on the disproportionately impacted communities map and some guidance that ECMC is putting forth. And so, first and foremost, the primary source of information for disproportionately impacted communities is through our partners at CDPHE. They have two tools on their website. One is the EnviroScreen map, and the other is this, which you see on the screen now, which is the disproportionately impacted community map. This has the various layers that I just talked about over on the right-hand side, excuse me, left-hand side. And then, you can see that on the right-hand side, those are mapped with different symbols. So you can see, what overlapping symbols might be affecting a census block group. You can also see the large dots are mobile home communities in that map. So this is the primary source for information related to whether or not a proposed or existing oil and gas location is within a disproportionately impacted community. ECMC, for the sake of convenience, is also putting these map layers on the ECMC GIS online. And so we've added this layer under ECMC under the subcategory of rules. It is listed here as the 2024 DI community map, as well as it's flagged by the CDPHE disproportionately impacted communities map 2024. So this is the most current data. We do have archive data on here as well. If you're interested in looking back on how it's changed, you can use that. And you can either click on the uh, combined data as shown on this image, or you can click on the individual layers if you want. For convenience, also, if you just have the combined layer as shown here, when you hover over the individual census block groups with your mouse, you will get a map tip that says, which criteria are met by that census block group. And if there are multiple, then it'll just say multiple. Um, I mentioned that we have finalized guidance. So today we are releasing disproportionately impacted community determination guidance. This is a brief document that essentially tells all operators to go ahead and use CDPHE's DI community mapping tool, which we have also made available on ECMC's GIS Online, and that all OGDPs submitted after December 15th, 2024 should use those November 2024 layers from the CDPHE map. The guidance document does describe the distinction between EnviroScreen and DI community mapping. There is quite a bit of it's how those two interrelate is complex, and so there's some description there. That's all I have. I imagine there will be questions, so I will keep my eye on the chat for questions. Thanks, Sienna.
Thank you so much. Mike, you're up next.
Thanks, Sienna. Good morning, everybody. Mike Leonard, QA/QC Manager here at ECMC. Have a quick reminder and updated request. So operators with option 3 or option 4 financial assurance plans, your contributions were due July 1st. Your contributions for the plan, in addition to any assurance, needs to be provided. We're going to start auditing those soon, potentially sending some of that to enforcement referrals. Please submit a Form 3A, enter your new or updated instruments, and allocate the instruments to fund your contributions. If you have any questions, contact Debbie Lutz at the contact information here. Secondly, we've been having some technical issues with the Form 3C, the replacement of bonds forms. So we're going to be suspending access to that Form 3C. Please send your request for replacements to the email address posted here, DNR underscore ECMC underscore financial assurance at state.co.us. Also use the subject line so that we can filter these quicker. If you have any, and again, if you have any questions, you can contact myself for Sharon Shefflin. And that's all I had for that.
Thank you so much, Mike. Aaron, you're up next.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining today's operator meeting. My name is Aaron Katz. I'm an area engineer who transitioned from industry into this role in 2019. Today, I'm going to be going over how to properly report intermediate string tests. This will include when the tests are required, how to submit the results, and what to do when pressures are observed. So, first, a reminder on Rule 419A. Wells must have access to monitor pressure in all annular spaces. So that means not just the braiding head, but also intermediate strings where applicable. The intent of this is to make sure that we can identify and address any deficiencies or integrity issues. So taking a look at Rule 419B and B4, these rules outline some of the requirements for both conducting and reporting braided tests. Focusing specifically on B4, we'll take a look at how the testing and reporting process are slightly different for intermediates compared to braided head only wells. So when you have a well with three strings, a surface, an intermediate, and a production casing, you're required to perform two separate 30-minute tests. So one's going to be for the surface casing annulus, commonly referred to as the braided test, and then you're going to have a separate one for your intermediate string annulus. Both tests are results are required to be reported to the ECMC. And an important note is the intermediate test results cannot be reported using the light bulk upload option. So for intermediate tests, you must either, if your well has three strings, you must either use the Form 17 or the full bulk upload version for wells. The reason being there are no data fields for intermediate casing pressure in the light version of the bulk upload. And quick little reminder here to touch on wellbore diagrams briefly. A current wellbore diagram is required for all wells, and it could be submitted as an attachment to a Form 17 or an alternative method that you want to coordinate with your area engineer if it's going to be coming in on a different form, such as a sundry. So we've had a little bit of a change to help display intermediate data on the Bradenhead Scout card. So now, if you record any pressure or flow on the intermediate string, you're required to submit that Form 4. Excuse me, got a little off track there. So I'll get back to that. On the intermediate test display here, we've updated that Scout card to display these intermediate tests. So if you want to see these details for a specific test date, you can click the link labeled click for specifics. And then it'll show you this data here, and it'll be for a full bulk upload submission. If you were to submit it on a Form 17, you would then click the doc number for that Form 17, and it would bring up the full Form 17. So getting back to some of that pressure follow-up in sundries, if you see any pressure or flow on that intermediate string, you're required to submit a Form 4 braided plan sundry notice and talk to your area engineer about what that pressure and flow looks like. Rule 419D applies here, and that states that sundries should be clearly outline the diagnostics and any analytical data. followed up by your plans for managing that intermediate pressure and/or flow. So continuing with some follow-up and sundry reporting. If you see pressure on both the Braden head and the intermediate annulus spaces, you can file one sundry for both of those instead of two. So just make sure it clearly identifies the pressure for each and the details for your plan to address both. If their plan is the same or you're going to use different mitigation methods for the surface and the intermediate string. So if you have any questions about reporting or testing procedures, please reach out to your area engineer or the supervisor for that area. And we also have a detailed guidance posted on our website that you can see. Click the link here when the presentation gets posted, but you can also go to the guidance documents on our website. Couple more just closing comments and wrapping things up. That kind of covers the requirements we got for intermediate strings, testing, reporting, and some of the kind of key points I want to hit on here is to always perform both Bradenhead and intermediate tests on three-string wells. And to submit that, it needs to be on a Form 17 or a full bulk upload method to get all three-string pressures reported to us. And if there is pressure or flow detected on that intermediate string, please submit a Form 4 sundry and coordinate that with your area engineer. That's all I have. So thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you so much, Aaron. Nick, you're up next.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. My name is Nick McFarland. I'm one of the area engineers here. Today I'm going to be giving the highlights of our updated mechanical integrity guidance document. This is not yet posted on our website, but should be soon, and you can locate it on the homepage by going to our forms and guidance section and operator guidance. You'll find all of our operator guidance documents there, and this one should be posted sometime in the next week. Important to note, this replaces two older guidance documents from about 10 years ago. If you've got a copy of those floating around, please be sure to delete those and get the new one as soon as it's posted. With that, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and just walk through the guidance document itself to point out some highlights. Give me just a second here. Everybody see that? Right.
Yes.
So new document does have a table of contents to make navigating a bit easier. Scroll down here and start out. The document starts off with test frequency by well type. We have created some visual guides this go around to hopefully make looking at the timelines a bit more of an easy thing instead of having to read through everything. I'll walk through the shut-in wells timeline. So for example, shut-in well on the initial date of shut-in is going to be considered day 0. 12 months thereafter, it would be considered an inactive designation. And then 6 months after being designated inactive, we would require that that well be abandoned, have a 6A filed for out of service, or return to production. In those cases, the MIT timeline would kind of cease at that point. But you have a fourth option of filing a 5B for continued inactive status. In that case, the MIT timeline continues, and at 24 months or 2 years, we would require the initial MIT to be performed, and then every 5 years thereafter, if the well remains shut in, a new MIT will be due. So at the 7-year mark, the 12-year mark, 17-year mark, so on and so forth. Below, there are similar timelines for other well types, but I won't belabor the diagrams right now. We do have additional timeline requirements that are written in text here for some less common well types across Colorado. Monitoring wells, Class 2 UIC wells, alternative production methods, and wells with open hole completions. If you have any of those wells in your inventory, please take the time to read those sections when the guidance document is posted. Moving on to documentation and observations of tests. All MITs are required to be notified on a Form 42. That should be filed at least 10 days prior to the anticipated testing date, but no more than a month before the scheduled event. We recognize that schedule changes come up often in the field. If you do need to reschedule one of those MITs, We have a couple of different buckets that those rescheduling can fall in. If it's going to be delayed by 1 to 5 days, we ask that you notify the area inspector of the new date. If you're going to be delaying it by more than 5 days, we would require a Form 42 update to be filed with the new anticipated test date. And in cases where you want to move the MIT forward to an earlier date than initially notified, you would need to get explicit approval from the inspector for that move to ensure that they have the opportunity to come out and witness the MIT if they deem it appropriate. Speaking of witnessed MITs, Class 2 UIC wells always require an ECMC inspector to be on location to witness the test. Um, we do encourage operators to reach out to our inspection staff to coordinate for getting those scheduled just to ensure that they are able to be on site and we don't waste anybody's time. Oil and gas wells or monitoring wells may also be witnessed by ECMC staff at their discretion, but it's not going to be every single one. There's some additional information for handling the inspection on site here. You can read that on your own time. Let's see, pressure charts. So there are two options when documenting an MIT pressure chart. We can either use a circular recording set, or you can use a data logger. In the case of a circular recording, we want to ensure that there's appropriate scaling. So if you're doing a 500 PSI test, we want to make sure we're not using a scale of 10,000 PSI on the chart. And we also want to ensure that the clock rate is appropriate. So something around 1 revolution per hour is generally appropriate. Similarly, if you're using a data logger, we require that both a pressure versus time plot and a data table is provided for that data. On the pressure versus time plot, again, keep in mind scaling. We want to make sure we can easily discern any fluctuations in pressure across the test. And on the data table, we just want to ensure we're getting a data point once every 15 seconds to once every minute. All MITs are required to be filed on a Form 21 within 30 days of testing. That should be submitted via web forms. And be sure to submit those pressure charts. And if it was a witness test, we want to see a scanned copy of the field version of the Form 21. That should have been signed by both the operator representative and the ECMC staff member who is witnessing the test. Test procedures. In preparation for performing an MIT, we expect that operators are giving the wellbore sufficient time to stabilize. Usually that means if you're putting some fluid in the wellbore, that's going to cause a temperature differential. We want to make sure there's time for that to stabilize so it doesn't have an adverse effect on the test, and we don't have to come out and then have the test be bad and retest or reschedule. Test durations and allowable pressure changes. MITs are required to be a minimum of 15 minutes long. Anecdotally, we do see a number of Form 21s come in where there are only 14 minutes of good test data. I assume there's just an issue in the field where somebody cuts the test short by 1 minute on accident. To that end, I would encourage operators to run their tests for 16 or 17 minutes at minimum, just to avoid submitting a test with 1 minute too little data and getting a failure because of that or needing to retest. Regarding pressure changes during the test, a well must not lose more than 10% of the initial test pressure over the course of the entire test. So in the case of a 500 PSI test, only 50 PSI would be allowed in fluctuation either up or down during the test. Furthermore, we do expect that the pressure stabilizes in the last 5 minutes of the test, and stable in this case is going to be defined as plus or minus 1% of the initial test pressure. So again, for a 500 PSI test, we'd expect that in the last 5 minutes, there's no more than a 5 PSI fluctuation. Test intervals. Essentially, there's only one number you need to remember in most cases, which is 100 feet. For vertical or deviated wells, we expect that the isolation device be placed within 100 feet of the top injection or production perforations or the open hole interval. For horizontal wells, we're going to expect that the isolation device be within 100 feet of the start of the curve into the lateral. And for wells with the liner hanger, we expect that that plug be placed within 100 feet of the top of the liner. There are some cases where we will allow for different configurations than those outlined, but those need to be specified and requested of ECMC engineering before the 42 notice is supplied. Let's see. And regarding remedial cement work, squeezes, etc., the short of it is all of those intervals are expected to be tested. Any perforations in the casing due to that type of work do not change the required intervals that were just discussed above. UIC wells have a couple of additional requirements, namely that the initial MIT performed on a UC well should be tested to the maximum injection pressure that's to be approved on the permit prior to commencement of injection. Any subsequent tests thereafter are going to need to be either the greater of 300 psi or the average injection pressure over the prior 12 months. Average injection pressure in this case is going to be defined as the average pressure only for months where injection was occurring, meaning there was a non-zero injection pressure over the course of that month. So if in the last 12 months you've only been injecting for 8 months, you would merely average those 8 months of injection pressures and call that your test pressure. Let's see, a few figures here to assist. Offset well prep. So we acknowledge there is a lot of offset well prep across the state for upcoming development and frac. With that said, there are slightly different requirements for offset wells, namely that at the time a plug is set to temporarily abandon an offset well prep, we require that it be pressure tested at that time, but it does not need to be a noticed pressure test in the way that a traditional MIT would be. The operator should be documenting the test pressure, the test duration, and the depth of the isolating device in those cases. And if the well remains shut in or temporarily abandoned for 2 years following the initial prep, we would expect that at that time a formal MIT is performed. And also, we do require that they have the temporary shut-in for HC prep signs. Let's see, failures. So for mechanical integrity failures, we kind of have two sets of situation for non-injection wells. Namely, if the mechanical integrity issue is discovered while the well is still within the proper timelines for mechanical integrity testing, whether that's discovered during an MIT or by other means, we would expect that the operator has 6 months to either repair the well and retest the well successfully or plug and abandon the well. If the mechanical integrity issue is discovered outside of that normal MIT timeline, meaning an MIT is overdue at the time of discovery, there will likely be a warning letter or NOAV issued, which would have a corrective action date that is less than 6 months out. UIC wells are similar, except that upon discovering any lack of mechanical integrity in a UIC well, we expect that it is shut in immediately and that ECMC staff is notified as well. Again, if it's discovered within the timelines of mechanical integrity by rule, you'll likely have 6 months to repair that. If it's discovered outside when an MIT is overdue, then there's going to be a repair timeline less than 6 months issued. But in all cases, not until a successful MIT is passed can injection resume. Past this, we have a few examples of charts and data loggers that are submitted so you can just see what we are looking for and what we're not looking for. Let's see. And finally, we have just a tabular form of the MIT timeframes if you prefer a tabular data. With that said, that covers most of the guidance document. Again, this should be posted to our website soon, so please download a copy as soon as you can. And if there are any issues with the guidance document, something's unclear, or you see an obvious mistake, please reach out to us and let us know. That's all I have for today. I'll turn it back over to Sienna.
Thank you so much, Nick. Aaron, you're up next.
Hi, thank you, Sienna, and good morning. My name is Aaron Trujillo, and I am the Western Reclamation Work Leader for the ECMC Reclamation Group within the Environmental Unit. The ECMC would like to cordially invite you to join an in-person reclamation presentation and question and answer panel discussion session with reclamation staff on October 7th, 2025 at the Colorado Mountain College campus in Rifle, Colorado. Our hope with this event is to create a platform in Western Colorado where oil and gas operators, contractors, and the ECMC can engage in in-person question and answer session and discussions related to reclamation. The ECMC have previously held similar in-person reclamation events within Eastern Colorado and would now like to present this opportunity to interested operators or contractors in Western Colorado. The agenda will include a presentation by Reclamation Supervisor Dr. Denise Arthur, where she will present on enhancing reclamation through seed mixtures and incorporating pollinator species in reclamation projects. We will then cover frequently asked questions related to Colorado interim and final reclamation requirements, and we'll conclude with questions from the audience directed to the Q&A panel featuring ECMC reclamation specialists from across Colorado. Please be aware, though, that a remote option to attend the presentation, Q&A panel, and discussion will not be available. Immediately following the presentation and Q&A session, ECMC East Reclamation Work Leader Chris Benches will conduct a cropland drone guidance training for oil and gas operators interested in participating in the ECMC Final Reclamation Drone Program. These annual trainings are required in order to participate, and for more details regarding this program, please refer to the operator guidance document posted on the ECMC website. For those of you who are interested in the training but are unable to attend in person, a remote option will be available. So again, this event will be held on October 7th, 2025 at the Colorado Mountain College campus in Rifle, Colorado between 8:30 a.m. and 12 p.m. with the reclamation drone training beginning at 11 a.m. An email with additional details will be sent out to everyone on the operator meeting list and will include a sign-up Google form in order to RSVP. If you know someone who is currently not on the operator mailing list who may be interested in attending, please feel free to forward the email notice onto them. Please sign up for one or both sessions via the Google form by 5 p.m. Friday, September 26th. And for those who RSVP and plan to remotely attend the drone training, Zoom credentials will be sent out on October 3rd. So that's all I have. Thank you for your time, and I hope to see you all there.
Thank you so much, Aaron. Stephen, you're up next.
Wonderful. Thank you, Sienna. My name is Stephen Schwarz, and I'm going to be talking today about plain language summaries. This is really a follow-up from my colleague Kristen Kemp's presentation at the July operator meeting. To go over a little bit about what was discussed there are two plain language summaries that are required as part of every OGDP. There is a plain language summary required to be attached to the Form 2B, and there is another plain language summary of the cumulative impacts analysis that going forward we're asking that be attached separately to the 2A. So on the 2A you'll have the cumulative impacts analysis and a separately attached cumulative impacts plain language summary. There's a new document label that will be available on the Form 2A either today or by the end of the week for cumulative impacts plain language summary. And this will allow easier public access to the summary via the website rather than having to search through the documents to find it. It'll be posted there for easier viewing from the public. So in light of this specific document being highlighted more, we wanted to provide some new operator guidance and templates to make it easier to write and fill out these summaries. So what have we created for you all? The three documents are a plain language guidance, a template for the cumulative impacts analysis plain language summary, and a template for the Form 2B plain language summary. The plain language guidance contains general guidance as well as links to resources on how one writes in plain language, avoiding technical jargon, avoiding too many acronyms, things like that. This is currently found in the Form 2A attachments guidance page. The cumulative impacts plain language summary template is an outline for the plain language summary for a generic cumulative impacts analysis. This template is also found on the Form 2A attachments guidance page because it is an attachment that is included on the Form 2A. And finally, the Form 2B plain language summary template, again, it contains templated language, stock sentences with areas to fill in for your specific operations. And this is found on the Form 2B attachments guidance page. So on this next slide, I have the screenshots of where these are located. So again, the main plain language guidance, as well as the cumulative impacts analysis template on the left, on the Form 2A attachment guidance part of that page. And then the 2B cumulative, the Form 2B template is found on the Form 2B guidance page under the attachment section. And that also has a link to take you back to the Form 2A page for that Master General Plain Language guidance. So a couple frequently asked questions: are these templates requirements or recommendations? While they are not required, we strongly recommend that you use these templates. This will help in standardizing what the public is reading, but also standardizes staff's review, allowing the staff's review of these documents to be faster. Another question we sometimes get: how do I know if my language is plain language enough? We refer you to the main plain language guidance documents, why we created that. It contains additional resources, not only guidance that we provided, but links to other sources such as federal plain language guidance and additional web resources for you. Also want to go into a little bit of the future cumulative impacts guidance documents that the team will be releasing over the next few months. The first is a master guidance document for writing a cumulative impacts analysis. We're targeting the September operator meeting to have that ready, but just like today, we won't hesitate to release in advance, so that's available to you early if we get it ready for publish in advance. The next guidance document we're targeting is a Form 2B checklist by the end of the fall. This will include all of the updates that were made at the start of this year that came out of the cumulative impacts and enhanced systems and practices rulemaking. And finally, we're targeting by the end of the year to have a Form 2D and Form 2F guidances out for you all to use and review. Of course, being cognizant of trying to get that 2D guidance out ahead of the February submittal date next year. If there are any comments, suggestions related to the plain language summary guidance or the templates, please contact me. We want these to be useful for you in ease in filling them out, useful for the public in reading them, and we won't hesitate to make changes if we get a lot of feedback. So please, if you want to see improvements, again, we want these to be useful to you and useful to the general public. So please let me know. And thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Stephen. Arthur, you're up next.
Good morning. I'm Arthur Kepsel, the Environmental Data Group Supervisor. Recently, I presented an update to the Commission about the House Bill 221348, and I wanted to follow up at today's operator meeting with additional information. Today, I'll repeat some of the information I shared in the hearing and also provide additional reporting data and some other updates that have happened in the last month. And just as a little spoiler alert, the ECMC is pleased that the operator compliance with the chemical disclosure rules is about 94%. So thank you. First, I want to start out with a short summary of House Bill 221348. Senate Bill House Bill 221348 aims to enhance oversight and increasing transparency of chemicals used in oil and gas production in Colorado. This requirement is in addition to Rule 208 chemical disclosures to Frac Focus. Submitting information to Frac Focus does not meet the requirements of House Bill 221348. House Bill 221348 has components that are intended to increase the transparency and augment protections of public health and the environment. It requires detailed chemical disclosure by chemical manufacturers and reporting of downhole chemical use by oil and gas operators. The law requires chemical manufacturers to report the chemical ingredients of their products. Operators then report which products they have used in downhole operations. By merging the chemical ingredients provided by the manufacturer with the reported chemical products, the ECMC then prepares a chemical disclosure list for each oil and gas location. The chemical disclosure list is posted online and required to be provided by the operator to communities surrounding oil and gas operations. I provided a link to the final legislation as well as other links elsewhere in the presentation that can be used when this presentation is published. I'll start by outlining the key provisions of House Bill 2213-48 as related to chemical disclosures. Disclosures are chemical manufacturers and distributors who are required to provide chemical product information to the ECMC. First, disclosures must disclose the trade names and chemical products and list the name and CAS numbers of each chemical ingredient in the product. Trade secret chemical constituent information must be disclosed as well. No chemical quantities, proportions, or percentages are required to be provided. Disclosures must declare that no PFAS or PFOA chemicals are contained in their chemical products, and PFAS and PFOA chemicals are prohibited from use by House Bill 2213-45. This prohibition went into effect on January 1st of 2024. Disclosures must be made 30 days prior to the first sale, distribution, or use of the chemical product. Manufacturers or other disclosures must provide this information on the Form 46 or chemical product registration form. Now I'll turn to the requirements for operators. Operators are to report on the Form 46A or chemical use form. Operators must disclose to the Commission the date of commencement of downhole operations, the county of the well site, well API numbers, and oil and location ID numbers. The trade names and quantities of all chemical products used in downhole operations, an additional PFAS declaration. In addition to submitting the Form 46A, operators are required to provide the chemical disclosure list generated by the ECMC to the community surrounding the well site. And I'll discuss the chemical disclosure requirements in a few minutes. To assist chemical manufacturers and operators with submitting the Form 46 and 46A correctly, there are guidance documents available on the ECMC website. Most recently added was the chemical disclosure, chemical and operator responsibilities guidance document that provides details about ECMC expectations for both operators and manufacturers or other disclosures, and which forms need to be completed and suggestions for completing the forms that are accepted on the initial submittal. The guidance document provides information requirements for the Form 1, registration for oil and gas operations, and Form 1A, designation of agents, and Form 46 that would be of interest to manufacturers or other disclosures who are not oil and gas operators. For operators, there's instructions for the Form 46A chemical product use form. The guidance also provides definitions that may be helpful in completing all the forms. And there's a link on this page as well as links to the guidance documents for the Form 46 and 46A. House Bill 2213-48 also includes provisions that require certain actions of the ECMC, namely creating and posting chemical disclosure lists and creating and managing a chemical disclosure website. The application to send operators the disclosure list by location has been completed. Once a Form 46A is submitted, the disclosure list will be compiled and emailed to the operator. A new list will be created each time a Form 46A is submitted. So if So if additional information is provided for an oil and gas location, disclosure lists will be updated and provided to the operator. The online chemical disclosure database will also be updated. And this is kind of an example of what the letter should look like, the email that you should get back looks like, and what the chemical disclosure list will look like. Then in order to be compliant with the notification requirements, operators are required to distribute the chemical disclosure list within 30 days of receiving it from the ECMC. Operators are responsible for determining the appropriate recipients near their operations. Upon receipt of the Form 46A, the ECMC will generate an email of the chemical disclosure within 1 business day or less. The ECMC is going to provide lists based on previously submitted 46As later today or tomorrow. ECMC will provide 1 disclosure list per location. So if multiple Form 46As were submitted for a location, only 1 disclosure list based on and including the most recent data will be provided. Once the email has been received, again, operators will have 30 days to provide the list to the public as required. In addition, chemical disclosure lists can be downloaded from the ECMC chemical disclosure database found in COGIS. Per House Bill 1348, oil and gas operators must provide the chemical disclosure list to the following: mineral owners, surface owners, building owners, residents, including tenants, schools, child care centers, school governing bodies, local governments with jurisdiction within half a mile of the well site, police, fire, emergency, and first responder agencies with well site jurisdiction, the state land board if state minerals are being developed, the BLM if federal minerals are being developed, the Southern Ute Indian Tribe if in reservation and commission jurisdiction, or if it's commission jurisdiction, public water system administrators with public water intakes less than 15 miles downstream, groundwater under direct influence or Goody supply wells within half a mile, or water supply wells with type 3 aquifers within a half a mile. Division of Parks and Wildlife, if there's a high priority habitat area within 1 mile or less, or within half a mile of a state park or recreation area. A complete list of recipients can be found on the community notification page on page 11 of House Bill 22-1348. Also, we have some applicable rules regarding the chemical disclosure records. This includes Rule 206A. Oil and gas operators must retain the documentation pertaining to the chemical disclosure mandates of House Bill 1348. This should include records of who received the chemical disclosure list, the date and method of provision, confirmation of receipt. As a reminder, 206A allows the ECM director to request these records for review. Also, chemical disclosure records must be preserved for a period of 5 years following the closure of the oil and gas location. And in the event of change of ownership, all chemical disclosure records must be transferred to and maintained by the new operator. Now for our reporting updates. As some of you may have heard, the ECMC staff met with operators regarding compliance with the legislation on May 29th And since that meeting, compliance with the chemical disclosure requirements has gone up considerably. As you can see circled in blue, we're now about 94% compliant. And on this slide, table 3 displays the information related to the Form 46 chemical registration form, which you can see we continue to get an increasing amount of forms. Table 4 displays the information regarding 46As submitted by operators, which shows a substantial increase in the number of wells and locations reporting on the Form 46A, even since the operator meeting last month. And then, as expected, Weld County continues to have the highest number of Form 46As submitted. And then Table 5 just displays some of the information directly related to Weld County. And again, the number of locations and wells reporting has increased since July. So that's all I have for my update today. So I'll turn it back to Sienna.
Thank you so much, Arthur. I'm going to read the questions in the chat at this time. It looks like there's only one question from Helen. Greg, I believe this is for you. It says, how often do you change the DI maps?
So thanks for the question. ECMC does not make changes to the maps. We are referring operators directly to the CDPHE DI community map, and we are simply offering CDPHE's maps on our website as a convenience to the operators. We will do our best to maintain currency with CDPHE's maps on our system, and if you ever find a discrepancy between the two, please let us know.
Thank you so much, Greg. It looks like someone else in the chat said the chemical reporting does not apply to chemicals used to treat the well for monthly operating. Not
That
sure.
is
Go ahead, Arthur.
that's for me. That is correct. At this time, downhole operations are for hydraulic fracturing. Month-to-month maintenance isn't, chemicals are not required to be reported.
All right, at this time, this concludes our monthly operator meeting. I want to thank you all for attending. As a reminder, everything will be posted on our website by the end of the week. Thank you so much again, and don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions or want to be added to the monthly operator email list. Have a good
Sienna,
day.
another question came in late.
Oh, go ahead.
Again for Arthur.
Jessica says, for wells that do not undergo hydraulic fracturing, does an operator need to file anything to confirm 46A exemption?
No, not at this time. But even if you were doing another kind of well stimulation, you would need to report that.
Last call for questions. All right, everyone. Thank you so much again and have a wonderful day.